Let's dive into the wide receiver rankings. As a reminder, our consensus rankings can be found at fantasypros.com/rankings. So make sure that you go check that out after the show. Now, before we dive into our S tier for wide receivers, if you want a chance to win a signed Tyreek Hill Miami Dolphins jersey, courtesy of bettingpros.com, your place to start betting smarter and not harder, you need to subscribe to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel right now. Comment below on this video, and that is it. We'll be announcing the winner right here on the channel, so make sure you turn on those notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up and to claim your prize. Now we'll go ahead and jump into the S tier. I thought I'd start us off with the Tyreek giveaway because S tier starts off with none other than Tyreek Hill, followed by Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Stephon Diggs, A.J. Brown. There's no real disagreements here, guys. I mean, how are you guys feeling about the S tier? It's solid. It's stacked.
The Cadillac tier of wide receivers. No question, you're playing all these guys every week. It's just a matter of, if you're playing DFS, which ones do you pick?
Yeah, love the chalk tier is what I call it. And, we're playing these guys every week. We're expecting big games in them every week. And sometimes they're shuffled, first, second, third. It doesn't really matter. I think there's an argument to be made for any of them. And so I think it's just a matter of how you want to separate them.
All right, jumping into the A tier. We do have a little controversy in the A tier here. We have Calvin Ridley, Devonta Smith, Chris Olave, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Adams, CeeDee Lamb, Keenan Allen, DK Metcalf. Still a fantastic tier, but I want to pull out Chris Olave here. ECR, wide receiver 8. Pat, you're online with that. Wide receiver 9. Billy, you have him at wide receiver 13. Is there some skepticism around Chris Olave in this matchup?
It breaks down just to implied total. It also breaks down to Derek Carr just not looking great last week. Maybe we see him a little bit more improved and a little bit more efficiencies here in week 2, but I'm just not completely sold on Derek Carr right now. I think that eventually we'll see Olave probably move up maybe a tick come Sunday game time, but preliminary rankings have him right now at wide receiver 13. He did see a nice healthy 30.3 target share with 10 targets. I'm projecting closer to 26% this week, but I think overall I like him. He finishes wide receiver 14 last week with 112 yards. There was no score there, so if he's going to get into that upper echelon, we're going to need to see a score. And so implied total a little bit harder to hit, but I definitely think it's possible.
Yeah, 8 catches for 112 yards, and now he gets a Carolina Panthers defense that just lost cornerback J.C. Horn, one of the better covermen in the league, to a hamstring injury. So I think Olave is going to be a smash play this week.
Poor J.C. Horn. He just can't seem to stay healthy, injury after injury. Michael Thomas, does that have any effect that you guys, where he's healthy? He is still healthy. He played a good percentage of snaps. He, saw a decent amount of targets. Early on, it looked like he might be the favorite in the eyes of Derek Carr, but then we eventually saw things even out. Any worries that we could see some, further involvement from Michael Thomas as he, moves forward this season?
Yeah, I think we will see him more and more involved. He saw 24.2% of the target share last week, 8 total targets. Projected, I would still have him around the 22.5%, but he was kind of the favorite early in the game, and I was a little concerned with where I had ranked Olave for the week, but it's kind of slowly but surely Olave's talent kind of crept through. But we could see Michael Thomas also be the benefit of this, depleted Carolina defense. But I think it all depends on what they're able to do on the ground as well. So we'll see how they attack the game plan. But I do think that Michael Thomas will be involved.
Yeah, I mean, I really love Chris Olave, the player, and I try to not get too caught up in the too many mouths to feed narrative sometimes, but boy, there are an awful lot of mouths to feed now with, New Orleans having a healthy Michael Thomas. Rashid Shaheed looked terrific in week 1. Juwan Johnson was somewhat involved. Alvin Kamara is going to be back in a couple of weeks. So, I think that might just prevent Olave from having top 5 upside, but I still think he's got wide receiver 1 upside. The guy's just too good.
the run game was mentioned there. Is it possible? Pat, we kind of talk about them attacking the secondary, but we also saw how, now granted, it's Atlanta. We saw how Atlanta attacked them on the ground as well and was highly successful with it. Jamal Williams in that matchup against Tennessee was absolutely dreadful, but unfortunately that was kind of, predictable. Tennessee does have a stronger run defense. If Derek Carr is a little bit shaky, is it possible that they maybe lean on the run a little bit more in this game?
Yeah, it's possible. And if the game script goes favorably and the Saints open up a big lead, but I do wonder how run heavy they can be if, with Alvin Kamara already missing and if Kendre Miller isn't able to play in this one, because really, I think the backup running back to Jamal Williams is probably effectively Taysom Hill. And I don't know if they want to run Taysom Hill a dozen times in this game. So I have a feeling it's going to be kind of a balanced offense no matter what, unless they, go up by 2 or 3 scores.
It is Taysom Hill. He saw 11.1% of the carries last week in the opportunity department. And then Rashid Shaheed was actually the RB3 at 7.4%. Tony Jones only saw 3.7. So I do think that we're going to see a combination of Jamal, Taysom, and probably some Rashid Shaheed again. And so I don't think we're going to see them ground and pound quite like Atlanta, but I do think that they may lean into Jamal knowing that they get Alvin Kamara back in a couple weeks.
Or Tony Jones can't even pass Rashid Shaheed. That's a shame. Moving on to the B tier, we've got Brandon Ayuk, T. Higgins, Amari Cooper, Garrett Wilson, Deebo Samuel, Chris Godwin, Tyler Lockett. This is a very interesting tier here. We've got Brandon Ayuk, who's coming off of that magnificent game where he really asserted himself as that final breakout performance that we were truly hoping to see from him. T. Higgins with the exact opposite of 0. Amari Cooper with the kind of game. But then Garrett Wilson, again, we know the controversy here with Garrett Wilson. Unfortunately, he is no longer with Aaron Rodgers. ECR has him ranked at wide receiver 18. Pat, you're at wide receiver 15. Billy, you are at wide receiver 30 on Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, Tara, you did an excellent job of finding the Achilles heel in my week 2 rankings. That one spot not covered by armor, and you just totally pierced me with the arrow here. I saw Billy's ranking for Garrett Wilson and immediately thought, oh man, I'm way too high here. So yeah, I don't totally want to write off Garrett Wilson's season just because Aaron Rodgers is done for the year. But Wilson did have 1,100 yards last year playing with Zach Wilson and Mike White and Joe Flacco. But the Jets passing game has this nightmare week 2 matchup against the Dallas Cowboys. And the Cowboys can absolutely terrorize quarterbacks. And we saw Dallas make Daniel Jones look like a Canadian Football League quarterback in week 1. So what are they going to do to Zach Wilson? Yeah, mea culpa. I have Garrett Wilson ranked way too high. I am going to adjust that and move him down. Man, I'm probably starting him still in most circumstances, unless I'm in an 8-team league, but I'm not feeling real good about it this week.
Yeah, this is a really tough matchup. Dallas just absolutely annihilated the Giants, and I think that this front is just so deadly. I don't even think that Wilson's going to be able to have time to process, let alone throw the ball well. And Garrett Wilson, we saw last week, really was bailed out by that touchdown. Wide receiver 22.5 point PPR, only 5 targets, 5 receptions, only 34 yards. So if he doesn't get that touchdown, he's well outside the wide receiver 30 mark where I have him ranked this week. And always gonna point to the implied total as well, 41.5. That means that they're 7.5 point dogs. It means the Jets are implied totals at 17. Not looking good from a number perspective. At least on the positive side, we saw Garrett Wilson see 27.8% of the target share. Unfortunately, that 27.8 was only 5 targets. So when we have an offense that's not able to throw the ball a lot, this number is going to be low. And so the opportunity itself is going to be limited and the ceiling is going to be limited. So I'm not sold on Garrett Wilson in week 2. To Pat's point, I don't think his season is completely over, but I definitely think that had we had the crystal ball prior to week 1, I think that Garrett Wilson probably would be more of a wide receiver 2, knowing that there's no Aaron Rodgers in town.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit earlier in the running back portion of the show. It's possible they rely on the run, but again, this is just a terrible matchup for, anyone to really thrive in this. So I'm with you guys on Garrett Wilson. He will be below ECR for me as well. Before we move on to our next tier, Pat and I were just talking about this before the podcast. Where I live, it is pretty much always summer, and summertime barbecues are the perfect time to enjoy time with friends, and nothing goes better with barbecue and friends than Miller Lite. Miller Lite is the 96-calorie beer that tastes like beer and is perfectly brewed for everything summer has to offer. Miller Lite is the perfect light beer for all beer lovers, and always, as soon as you take your sip, that day, the barbecue, conversation with friends, it just gets instantly better. Whether you're spending long afternoons behind the grill or watching the person who is actually on the grill, live those summer moments with Miller Lite and let the great taste of Miller Lite hit your taste buds so hard that you feel it in your heart. With a Miller Lite in your hand, summertime doesn't just taste great, it tastes like Miller time. To get Miller Lite delivered right to your door, visit MillerLite.com/FantasyPros. That's MillerLite.com/FantasyPros. Or you can find it pretty much anywhere that sells beer. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 96 calories and 3.2 carbs per 12 ounces. All right, let's jump into the next tier, our C tier. Still not a bad option. I see some of our favorites in here. We lead off with DeAndre Hopkins, DJ Moore, Mike Williams, Mike Evans, a favorite here that we are all drafting. Zay Flowers on this show, very pro Zay Flowers, Jahan Dotson, Michael Pittman, Terry McLaurin, and George Pickens. So there's a couple guys in this tier that I want to pull out right here. We'll start off with DeAndre Hopkins. Obviously, if anybody watched that Tennessee game, it was tough to watch Ryan Tannehill. ECR has him at wide receiver 22. Pat, you've got him right on track there with wide receiver 23. Billy, wide receiver 14. Tell us why you are so pro DeAndre Hopkins, other than the obvious.
I like DeAndre Hopkins' overall involvement in the offense. We saw Treylon Burks kind of lack last week. DeAndre Hopkins has inserted himself as the alpha, and I just don't think that that's going to stop. We saw the chemistry that they were able to build in the offseason, and although it was, a less than stellar performance last week, DeAndre Hopkins, I'm expecting to come back this week. So he did see a total of 39.4% of the target share last week. That's unsustainable, but if we can even expect somewhere closer to 28-29%, we're talking about elite level of production, or not production, but elite level of opportunity from the wide receiver. If we can see anything over 30%, then we're talking about some of the highest involvement in the offense across the league. And yes, it is the Tennessee Titans, and the volume is not quite there in comparison to other teams. But you still like to see the overall involvement. They are facing the Chargers, so we are expecting a higher over-under, 45.5. And if we can see them kind of playing catch-up this week and playing from behind, I like the 30% line, when they're probably going to be closer to that 35, 36 attempts if they're going to be playing from behind all game. So like Hopkins, like the implied total, like the overall over-under, and I think that it's a smash play this week.
Yeah, so wide receiver 23, I do have Hopkins ranked as a low-end wide receiver 2. I can't quite get to where Billy is on high-end wide receiver 2, and I realize the matchup looks pretty good. The Chargers' pass defense was absolutely flambéed by the Miami Dolphins and Tua Tagovailoa last week, but the Titans' passing game looked really alarmingly bad against the Saints in week 1, and we suspected the Titans were going to have one of the worst offensive lines in the National Football League. And week 1 did nothing to dispel that preconceived notion about how much trouble they were going to have with blocking, pass protecting. And Ryan Tannehill looked pretty awful. So I think people should start Hopkins in most cases, but I'm not wildly confident in any component of the Tennessee passing game.
Yeah, I feel you on that. I get the arguments from both sides. It's DeAndre Hopkins, and he was the clear wide receiver 1 in that offense. It's just, are we trusting Ryan Tannehill to generally look better this week? The next one that I want to talk about here, this one is a guy that, if you know me and Pat, we were watching this game, Blackhawks, the Green Bay Packers, and the Chicago Bears. We're not going to talk about the Packers because, all that was positive. We're going to talk about DJ Moore and the differences that we have on him, compared to ECR. I'm with you. I'm tipping my hat before I even give the actual ranking. Let me get that first. So we've got wide receiver 23 for DJ Moore. Billy, you are wide receiver 35. Pat, you are wide receiver 17. I'm not going to lie, Pat, I am on your side on this one. Breakdown for why you have DJ Moore at wide receiver 17.
Oh, but Tara, we are going to talk about the Green Bay Packers here. And we're going to talk about the way that they chose to handle pass coverage against the Bears in week 1. Now, I thought we might see a lot of zone defense from the Packers because zone allows defenders to face the line of scrimmage and react more quickly to a quarterback who likes to run, as is the case with Justin Fields. But no, the Packers played a lot of man coverage against the Bears in week 1, and they had Jair Alexander, one of the best pure cover men in the game, shadow DJ Moore on the vast majority of his snaps. Alexander is just great. I mean, remember, he was doing the gritty against Justin Jefferson late last year when, he manned up on JJ in that second meeting between the Packers and the Vikings in the regular season and pretty much shut him down. So I'm not going to panic over DJ Moore. In fact, I think maybe getting shut down in week 1 lights a fire under him for week 2. And the Fields to Moore connection was reportedly working great in training camp. We saw some of that in the preseason. They looked really sharp together. So this is not the time to bail out on DJ Moore. I think you go right back to the well with him and do not panic bench him in week 2.
Billy, have we convinced you, or how you feeling?
No, I just see the problem is that I'm just I love DJ Moore as a talent. I thought this was a lateral move when they went out and acquired him in the offseason. And I said it all offseason. I'm going to continue to say it, is that Justin's Fields he actually threw a lot more in week 1 than we expected, but it was because of the game script and playing from behind. But he still didn't look the greatest as a passer. And so when we know that this is his weakness and his strength is on the ground, we saw him finally move the ball when he was utilizing his legs. Because when he was throwing the ball, he was actually just using his running backs as the outlet. And so DJ Moore only saw 5.7% of the target share last week. I know that's not going to happen again. That was purely because of Jair Alexander. He's typically around that 26% target share. And I think I have him projected for 24% this week. That being said, though, the running back usage inside of the passing game was a little alarming in terms of DJ Moore's potential future output, because we saw Khalil Herbert at 14.3%. We even saw Dante Foreman at 8.6%, which never happens. That guy is usually like a sub 2 to 3% target share kind of guy. And Roschon Johnson in his first game saw a 20% target share. So what does this tell me? It tells me that they're trying to build the confidence of Justin Fields as a passer, and they're using those running backs as outlets, and or the line isn't able to hold up long enough for him to let a play develop. And so if we continue to see that throughout the season, I have major concerns with DJ Moore. I'm not benching him quite yet. I'm still playing him. But that being said, I think I do have a little bit of concern if I'm a fantasy manager.
I get that. It seemed, we might have overestimated the jump that Chicago made with their moves in the offseason. They still have some stuff to work through, and I think that's what we're seeing live. Jumping to the D tier here, Christian Kirk, Cortland Sutton, Gabe Davis, Michael Thomas, Drake London, Brandon Cooks, and Jordan Addison. I mean, there are some up and down names in here, but the one that I want to pull out here is Brandon Cooks. We've got him at wide receiver. It's kind of, this one is interesting. You guys are on very opposite ends, very disagreeing with ECR. ECR has him wide receiver 37. Billy, you've got him wide receiver 28, so you're feeling more confident. And Pat, you've got him wide receiver 48. You were on the opposite ends of the spectrum with ECR. Let's duke it out.
Yeah, I'll start here first. Brandon Cooks is kind of always quietly one of the most underrated wide receivers in the NFL, continues to just put up 1,000-yard seasons. Got to like the offense now, and what Dallas is going to be able to do is him as the number 2 here, and he no longer has to be that number 1. He only saw 16% of the target share last week, but they also didn't really have to move the ball down the field because their defense was just dominating that matchup, as we've said in previous podcasts. But That being said, we still expect him to be a large part of the game plan. I'm projecting a 23% target share, and we know they're facing the Jets this week. And so I don't think that they're necessarily going to have to rely on the passing game, but I do like his chances of being over that wide receiver 30 mark. I think overall, always underrated, and I think that he's going to come through again for fantasy managers.
Yeah, and I don't like to sort of go all in with matchups when I'm deciding whether to start or bench someone. I think a lot of people tend to overplay matchups, but however, the Jets are a matchup. Like if I'm on the fence about a player, like I am siding on benching my quarterbacks and wide receivers against the Jets because they have a terrific set of cornerbacks with Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed, and Michael Carter II, and they can get pressure on quarterbacks without blitzing. I mean, they just have a ferocious pass rush. So as brutal a matchup as the Jets are for wide receivers and quarterbacks, like, it's different with a wide receiver one. Like, I'm not going to bench CeeDee Lamb this week. And we saw Stephon Diggs have a nice game against the Jets in week 1. But Gabe Davis was pretty quiet in week 1. And so I don't really want to start the wide receiver 2 for the Cowboys this week. Cooks is certainly playable in neutral or favorable matchups. I don't want to play him this week against the Jets.
Yeah, I get that as well. Moving on to the F tier. It's a big tier here. There's some promise and interesting names, but we'll pull out one name in particular in this group. Going through the tier real quick, Elijah Moore, Marquise Brown, Nico Collins, Romeo Doubs, Puka Nakua, Odell Beckham Jr., Treylon Burks, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Zay Jones, Sky Moore, Christian Watson, and Jerry Jeudy. The name that I wanted to pull out of here, it's the biggest name of the week, quite honestly. It's Puka Nakua. We won't bury the lead there. We've got ECR. There's no disagreement from you guys. So you guys just wax poetically about how you're more positive than ECR, who has him at wide receiver 43. Billy, you've got him wide receiver 31, and Pat, you've got him wide receiver 23 or 33.
15 targets, just like we all drew it up last week, 119 yards. No, I'm kidding. Nobody saw that coming. But I do like his usage. It was really impressive, actually. 40.5 target share, Pat, last week for Puka Nakua at 15 targets. I don't expect that to continue. That's, of course, unsustainable. But 27% is realistic now on a week-to-week basis. So the model is being updated consistently with more data with Puka Nakua. That being said, we talked about this game script earlier. They are facing my beloved 49ers, and we are expecting a negative game script yet again. And so if that continues, we could anticipate the Rams throwing pretty heavily again, playing catch up. We know that they're not going to be leaning into Cam Akers. We saw that mess last week with Kyron Williams stepping in as well. And so I'm going to be targeting the wide receivers and the pass catchers in this matchup. We know the Niners are very stout against the run. They're very stout against the tight end. So the receivers in the secondary is where they're vulnerable. And I think that Puka Nakua is probably going to make another splash in week 2 in 2023.
Yeah, Tara, I love that you are choosing to close the show with Puka talk. And Billy, I love that you are actually even higher on Puka than I am, which I didn't think was possible. 15 targets. Yes, that is the most by a rookie receiver since the NFL began keeping track of targets. And it wasn't like Puka was going up against some team with a blatantly terrible pass defense. Like Seattle, maybe not a lights out pass defense, but it's not like they're the Cardinals or the Titans. It's a respectable pass defense. And it's funny, I tweeted out something yesterday about Puka being the priority waiver ad for this week. And of course, I heard from a lot of contrarians like, oh, this is classic week 1 overreaction. Just wait till Cooper Kupp comes back and Puka's going to totally disappear. First of all, if you think Cooper Kupp is just coming right back, totally good to go in week 5 as soon as he's eligible to come off IR, you are really putting the fantasy in fantasy football. They sent him halfway across the country to see a specialist. I mean, that is not run-of-the-mill stuff. Like if the Rams medical staff thought it was just a normal hamstring injury, they wouldn't be sending him to a specialist. So Puka's got a really long runway here. And second of all, Puka naysayers need to go back and rewatch that game, because he was getting the Cooper Kupp usage in that game. Like Billy said, 40.5% target share. Matthew Stafford was force-feeding Puka the same way he normally feeds Cooper Kupp. So that was not a fluky game. I'm 10 spots above ECR, and I'm probably still too low on Puka for week 2.
I feel that. He's Puka Nakua Cup. That is what we dub him now. Before we close out the show, I'll give you one of my favorites that I'm higher on than ECR. I'll do it really quick here. Wide receiver 8 is where I have Keenan Allen. He's a top 10 receiver for me. It's not that different than ECR that has him at wide receiver 13. But again, we've got the possibility of Austin Eckler not playing, and we just really saw the Chargers rely aggressively on that ground game. We saw some volume, but not a ton. But we did see Keenan Allen, healthy Keenan Allen, be the clear wide receiver 1 and the dominating force within that receiving core. And I think that continues this week. So that is one that I am absolutely loving. All right, guys, and that wraps things up for our weekly ranking show. If you want to see more advice from Pat and check out his rankings, just go to fantasypros.com/fits. And if you have any questions about lineups or trades, we are live each and every single Thursday on YouTube at 3 p.m. EST, 12 p.m. PST, taking your questions. We appreciate you tuning in. For Pat Fitzmaurice, for Billy Muzio, I'm Tera Roberts. We'll see you next time.